Welcome to the Beyond the Horizon podcast. In this episode, Enable's Jason Murphy and Jeff Green talk vulnerability management, why it matters, what's changing, and how to turn risk into resilience.
If you think about all the various different ways that bad actors want to take advantage of and get at data, all those things require an in. Exploiting vulnerabilities is kind of part and parcel to the toolkit.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. I'm Jason Murphy, head nerd here at Enable. Today we're going to be talking about why vulnerability management matters. I mean, vulnerability management isn't just for MSPs, but for anybody serious about cyber or business resilience. I'm joined today by Jeff Green, our distinguished product leader for vulnerability management. Jeff, let's start with you. Can you give the audience a sense of your role and how you kind of came here?
Sure. So I'm responsible for leading the product management for vulnerability management inside of our UEM platform. So both Nsight and N-Central delivering that vulnerability management feature. So I've been with Enable now for about 5 years. Before coming to Enable, and I've been in multiple different product management roles for different projects throughout that span. But before coming to Enable, I came from the practitioner world, right? I was a CTO for an MSP, MSSP, and that serviced mid to large enterprise. So we did a lot of vulnerability management as a service, if you will, patch as a service. And before that, obviously the IT MSP work and kind of coming up through the ranks as a data center engineer over the years. So server hardware, endpoints, network. So a lot of infrastructure experience, a lot of experience in living this day to day, both on the IT management side and the MSP management side. And now, kind of a confluence of events guiding the development for what are we going to deliver through Enable for vulnerability management to our MSP and IT customers.
Awesome. Now, obviously, let's talk about kind of the reality of it all. Before we get into kind of features, functionality, roadmaps, that kind of stuff, let's get into the why. So why is vulnerability management such a critical part of cyber and business resilience today? Like, why? What is the impetus here?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about all the various different ways that bad actors want to take advantage of and get at data processing capability. They want to get into an environment. They want to exfiltrate data. They want to ransomware systems, shut things down. All those things require an in, right? So there's obviously the social engineering aspects of getting in. Convincing a user to click on something they shouldn't click on, convincing a user to do something they shouldn't do, weak passwords, things of that nature. But that's not always enough to get where a bad actor wants to go. So you've also got to then, once you're in, maybe you don't have everything you need. You need to find other tools. And so exploiting vulnerabilities, software vulnerabilities predominantly, is kind of part and parcel to the toolkit. So vulnerability management is really about identifying those risks of software configuration, software bugs, known vulnerabilities, known ransomware campaigns, known exploits, kind of bringing that inventory together so that you know what your risk posture is, and then managing it. And that's why we call it vulnerability management, not vulnerability detection. So you really have to manage it because you can't always just patch the software or uninstall it. There are reasons that insecure software has to run in an environment. It's business critical. It's the only way that things get done. It's no longer supported, but we have to keep it in our environments. So understanding what that risk is and which systems are most risky also gives you the ability to manage your time, because just patch everything full all the time. Yeah, it sounds great, but it's not real practical. So vulnerability management is really about inventorying the risk, putting it in a place where you can see it and make smart decisions on what to tackle first, because there's so much. Um, we've got just in the public preview of our solution, we've got customers that are have millions of vulnerabilities that we've detected, um, and we're only detecting today. We can talk about maybe where we're going to go in general later, but today we're only detecting vulnerabilities for installed software. We're not even yet looking at the operating system itself. Um, Coming soon to a theater near you. But you know, millions of vulnerabilities are just, you know, it's too much for anyone to really manage. And so prioritizing, inventorying, and then remediating, right? Doing something about it. Um, you got to knock that list down.
Right. And one thing I want you to do, if you could, only because you're really talking about the what, right? Like this is the landscape. This is what we do in terms of what vulnerability management is. But can we talk about a little bit about the why? Why is this such a hot topic with IT leaders? Whether you're again an IT department, an SME, SMB, an MSP. Well, all of those, people who are working in IT, and maybe also if you could talk about why it's so important and why it's such a hot topic, but also why we decided to put it in kind of the UEM portion instead of putting it maybe into Adlumin or what have you.
So that's like a 10-part question. So I'll try and tackle a couple pieces of it. But so you know, vulnerability management is risk management, right? So you would not, as a business owner, right, to take the IT portion out of it out, right? You're a business owner. Your job is to manage your business and and manage the risk of running that business. So why is it important is much the same reason as why you make sure that you have working fire alarm system, right? It's a risk management necessity today. Um, it impacts your insurance. It impacts your potentially even the continuity of your business. So uh, it's it's high up on the list for of things that are being talked about in supply chain as well. There's a lot of government regulations around you have to have vulnerability management programs in place in order to qualify to do business with entities. Um, and that supply chain depth is, it reaches even the smallest customers. You make a bolt that goes into a fighter jet, you're in the supply chain, right? So now you're subject to these kind of requirements, but it's not just because it's a requirement. It makes good sense, you know. You want to manage that risk. Um, so yeah, it's super hot right now because there's a lot of focus on it. Obviously a lot of the headline news around ransomware outages and data breaches and theft that drives the awareness. But ultimately, the why is just because it's good practice. Um, why would you? Why wouldn't you want to lock your doors, right? Why wouldn't you want to make sure you have a fire suppression system? Why wouldn't you want to make sure that you've got redundancies to keep your business running? Same thing here, right? If you never take your car in for an oil change, if you have a car that needs an oil change these days, but if you never take your car in for an oil change, it's going to break, and it's going to break when you least want it to. So vulnerability management is also about um, not just about security; it's also about continuity. It's also about productivity. Um, Software bugs don't necessarily just take you down because somebody, you've got a bad actor. It could just be, a failure that causes an outage. So keeping keeping your IT systems healthy is what it does, but the why is because it makes it makes good business sense. It's about risk management. And why did we put it into our UEM platform as opposed to our ADRs and MDRs and things like that? I mean, obviously, there are a ton of tools out there to do pieces of vulnerability management, right? There's a ton of scanners that you can get on the market that will scan. In fact, every scanner will give you a different result, which is spectacular for trying to manage that risk registry, if you will. Um, but the part of the problem with that is great. I've got a list of risks somewhere over here, um, but now what do I do about it? Right? So where am I going to go to manage those risks? Where am I going to go to install new software updates or remove software? Well, the tool that most of our customers use, right, is our UEM platform for that. So it just made logical sense to bring the fact that, you know, um, much like Steve Jobs said, the best camera that you have you can make is the one you have in your pocket at the time that the thing you want to take a picture of is, right? I totally butchered that quote, by the way, but the sentiment is there, right? So the best tool that you can have to fix a vulnerability is the one that's already there, which is more than likely going to be your UEM solution, your Insight or your N-Central agent. So it makes perfect sense to use that same agent to ask what's the vulnerable software and then give you the ability to fix that vulnerability. And you stay in one screen, you stay in one tool, um, and it knows, right? Because it's connected. It knows that I have this vulnerability. You just ran the patch. Let's scan it again. Oh, that vulnerability is gone. Great. Let's you know circle of life.
You did touch on kind of like, you know, as a business leader, you would determine financial risk and take that very seriously. We're doing now the exact same thing for, the risk within technology. Have you seen things like, because you did touch on cyber insurance, have you seen things like cyber insurance or regulatory pressure push companies to take this more seriously? And can you maybe expand on that a little bit? Like, is it just auditing? Is it like, I'm not going to take on this liability until you actually plug all of these gaps? Like, how does that look today?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is IT risk, especially, cybersecurity risk through vulnerabilities as a pathway. That's a financial risk too. So, so don't stick that in a separate category, right? It's a financial risk. It can put you out of business. When I worked at the MSP, we had multiple companies that were literally brought to the edge of extinction by ransomware attacks, and those ransomware attacks came in through software vulnerabilities. Um, uh, m- I will say that most of those customers we inherited after they had the breach. We did not have too many, if any, customers that got breached on our watch. Um, so we were doing the right things to manage these vulnerabilities, so that didn't happen. But it's not just a financial, it's not just a technical issue, it's or a productivity issue. It is a financial risk, and there are absolutely um, regulatory concerns, but also liability concerns. So I have seen more than I'd like instances where insurance providers, even if they are providing cyber insurance software, cyber insurance policies, will come back and say after a breach, we are not going to cover the risks or cover the costs because you did not do due diligence. And a vulnerability management program is part of that due diligence. Um, when you're filling out that survey or that form to apply for cyber insurance, more often than not, you're seeing questions about, do you have a formal vulnerability management process? Do you have a formal patch management process? And if you check the box yes, but then you don't actually do it, well, you just give the insurance company an out. And at this in this day and age, if you check the box no, the likelihood that you're going to get more than one very very expensive policy in your quote box is that's what's going to happen. But there's also regulatory, right? So I mentioned supply chain. There are CMMC in the U.S. is a perfect example where you've got Department of Defense. Anybody who's in the defense industrial base is responsible for a whole lot of requirements, but one of those requirements is a vulnerability management program. Um, and, you would think that, oh, yeah, I don't do any work with defense. It doesn't impact me. But it does, because if you're a supplier of a supplier of a supplier, it all kind of snowballs and rolls downhill. And similar requirements are happening, all across the world, whether it be for defense industrial base or just from a, general continuity of business. Accounting policies obviously have it in there. Um, you get vendor surveys asking you about your IT, and you're like, I ship you carpet. What do you care about my IT? Well, they care because if you're at risk as a supply chain uh, to that business, then they want to know. So there's all sorts of different factors there. In Ohio, where I'm at, there's even a legislation. If an organization experiences a cyber breach and they have um, can prove that they have programs like a vulnerability management program, they're following a framework, um, that is a defense to liability for, data breach or data loss. So we're seeing governments now put in place legal protections for customers uh, if they do the right things.
Right. And I mean, as you're talking through the modern challenge, as I'll call it. You also described like there are so many CVEs. You talked about millions, right? How obviously that's a lot to deal with. So with so many CVEs kind of dropping daily, how do we at Enable help kind of IT teams focus on what actually matters? And maybe if you could talk about what that priority kind of looks like, hey, I have a million things to do now. Where do I start?
Yeah. So when we thought about vulnerability management, obviously we knew that there would be this flood of information. And so it's not just about, hey, here's an inventory, good luck. Um, so one of the things that we've done with our vulnerability management in UEM is to marry it with um, the threat feed information and the CVEs, the common vulnerability enumerations, but also expanded it with information that you could go find yourself, right? So it's not like we're making a judgment call on our own part. We're using the same data sources that you would use if you were doing this yourself manually, but we're pulling it together so that you can get it all done in one place. So we pull in the CVE information, we pull in from CISA the KEV or the known exploit um, records now to show you if you not just, hey, I've got this vulnerability, it's got a 9.8 rating on some scale that nobody really understands. They just accept that 9.8 is bad because it's close to 10, right? Um, and you've got this number, you've got this level. It's critical, it's important, it's immediate and slow, right? Who knows? Um, but we're taking that information, we're putting it alongside. Is there a known exploit? Is there known ransomware? Um, and we're also putting that into our views and giving you the ability to kind of sort and filter by, you know, show me critical assets that have critical vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited, right? So you're trying to pare down the corpus of data down to, um, just give me like 10 things that I can do today that are going to fix the problem or that are going to make it better. It the the other thing that we've seen through this preview process is every time we wipe, a million vulnerabilities out, another million backfill, another 1.1 or 1.2 million backfill. So there's it's a unrelenting wave of new stuff along with the old stuff. So if you just sit there and let it keep accumulating, it's tough. So just focus on here's the 10 I'm going to fix today. Here's the 10 I'm going to fix today. And combine that with a lot of the great things that we already do in N Central and Nsight around patch management, patch automation, right? To kind of get some of that noise out um, of the system. But it also the other thing that vulnerability management is designed to do is to tell you how well you're doing in that process, right? Um, So if you've got automation running that says, okay, I automatically want to patch every month, all low and medium criticality, and I don't even want to look at it, just do it, right? Um, you still want to know that that's working. So the other thing that we focused on was not just giving you those indicators that you can help use to help prioritize, but also giving you some sense of efficacy. Is are your efforts do your efforts matter? Um, are you being successful? Um, one of the challenges, especially that our MSP customers face, is they're also multi-tenant, right? So an IT organization could have these same kind of issues if they've got divisional differences or something like that. But if you think about the the landscape of assets that an administrator has to manage, there are always these like one-offs and caveats and differences by location or by business division or by customer if you're an MSP. Um, and so you've you've got to have a way to kind of roll that all up and see the full view of risk, but then drill down and say, okay, in this customer or in this business division, I can't patch this application because it's on a medical device that if I change it in any way, it no longer is approved, right? Or something like that, right? So you've got to have a way to narrow the lens to a specific group, which we give you, right? Of site, customer, um, location, asset type, show me only servers, show me only workstations. Um, we'll be bringing in some of the cool things around the asset tagging that we're working on to give you the ability to say this is a business critical server, this is a testing server. I don't care so much about it, right? This is an internet facing server. It has internet exposure because one of the things that we also do, we bring in through that thread feed is we bring in MITRE's common weakness enumerations. So things that about a given vulnerability are the way that you can exploit it. Well, if you've got multiple vulnerabilities on a given system, that creates a constellation of opportunity for an attacker. So using those CWEs to kind of build up a risk profile of, yeah, if it just was this one vulnerability, who cares? But it's this vulnerability married with this other vulnerability. Now there's a through line. Oh, and it's internet exposed, so there's a way for somebody to go touch that through line of vulnerability without being stopped at the exterior border by a firewall or something like that, right? Those are the types of things that we're building up data on and presenting uh, to customers um, to really help hone in on what are truly the most important risks that I need to manage and vulnerabilities that I need to extinguish.
And you're kind of making me think here because as you're talking about vulnerabilities, I notice I've just gone into my own lab, my nerds training server, and I've lab devices, and I've noticed that through patch management or through third party patching or what have you, we can resolve these particular vulnerabilities. Can maybe you also touch on what happens when there's not a patch? Like how does an IT team use kind of the data that we provide, but also what would the next steps be when there, when there's nothing else to do? Like, how does that look as well from protecting the crown jewels or an ERP system? Or, I mean, let's be real. Like, if you've got an endpoint, like a workstation or a laptop that has a vulnerability, but then you've got an on-prem ERP system that has a vulnerability, I mean, the focus needs to shift a little bit.
We recognize that, and practitioners in this space will, you know, when you talk about the entire life cycle, there's a point at which you have to deal with acceptance of the risk, or um, some other mitigating or compensating control that you have to put into place because you can't patch it, right? So um, we don't do it today, but it is in development. But documenting that acceptance of the risk, and maybe it's not even you, the MSP, or you, the IT technician, that needs to accept the risk. Somebody somewhere else in the organization, like a business owner or an executive, has to actually accept the risk which means they need to understand the risk, which means you need to explain this vulnerability means that somebody can do this bad thing, but we don't have a fix for it. Uh, Or this vulnerability means somebody can do a bad thing, but it's a very, edge case. It's going to cost us more to fix it to fix it than it is to accept it, the risk, right? So there's that risk acceptance process. It's just kind of part of the standard cybersecurity model. But that mitigation process, can be a bunch of things, right? You could have a script that you need to run manually, or a firewall rule you have to change, or potentially you need to isolate or segment that asset so that you can control access to it. So it's not always just install the patch or uninstall the software. So, but one of the things that we've I know from my experience and from the folks that I've talked to that are doing this on a day in day out basis, one of the challenges is you've got these scanners that just run and give you this dump of risks, right? And they give you the same risks every month, but you're like, yeah, we've already accepted those 10, or we've already mitigated those 20. But there's no good place to document that acceptance or mitigation. Maybe it's in a spreadsheet, or maybe it's in, some other system, but it's not correlated to the scan results. That's not correlated to the place where the technician is actually doing the work. So, the direction we're going is to bring that acceptance and mitigation documentation into the UEM. So the same place that you're going to go and look at uh, this risk, should I patch it? Should I uninstall it? Oh, I can't do either of those things. Well, I need to accept the risk. Well, I, the technician, can't accept the risk. I mean, maybe I can technically, but I shouldn't be the one making that decision. So documenting that acceptance of risk, especially if you're an MSP, right? Hey, Mr. Customer, we're not going to patch this because you've got this other reason you can't, but you need to know that we're not going to patch it. You need to accept that risk. So if something happens, right, as an MSP, it's not my fault, right? The business knew about it. Because that creates all sorts of sad. But then you've also got documenting what it was the mitigating or compensating control that you put in place, so that when it scans again, you don't get an alert that says, "Hey, you got this vulnerability." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I get it, but I already mitigated it." And then the other part that we're building into that process is you can't just like accept it forever, right? The threat landscape is constantly changing. The business is constantly changing, right? So what we're building in there is also to help businesses and MSPs deal with this is a review cycle, right? You can accept the risk for 90 days, but that acceptance is gonna expire, and then it's gonna start telling you got a risk again. Um, or some, we're still working through the vagaries of how long and how many days, but let's just say 90 days, right? So somebody's got to go back in every 90 days and say, do we still want to accept this risk? Has the risk posture changed? Is this now riskier than it used to be? Or could it be, you know what? We finally upgraded the software that relies on this, and we don't need this piece anymore. Now I can uninstall it and get it out of my environment, right? The reason to accept it is no longer there. So having that kind of hygiene around risk acceptance and mitigation lets you continuously improve your posture as well.
Only because you did say things like when. I think now would be a great time to talk about things like roadmap, because obviously there is going to be some kind of North Star. Uh, well, maybe it's ever evolving, but can you talk about how it is today and kind of where we're going?
So today, I would say we are at a stage of um, third-party application vulnerability scanning, right? So any application that's installed on the system, whether it be Mac, Windows, Linux, and is registered with kind of the package manager of the system, whether it be Windows registry or Windows installed apps or RPM or Mac, right? Those things we are scanning for now. We're inventorying them. We're comparing them to known CVEs, and showing you the list, right? With that threat intelligence alongside of it, the CSICAV, the exploit. And we're starting to tie those together into some of the basic actions you can take in the UEM, like reboot, take control, right? Um, Coming down the pike in kind of this quarter and the first half of next year, we're going to expand that from third party application detection, vulnerability detection, to true third party application remediation. So full vulnerability management around it. So you'll be able to not only see the applications that are installed and their vulnerabilities, but you'll have a remediation option where you can uninstall the application, you can patch the application or install an update, um, and so that's where we're going to start to give you that full life cycle in the first half, and maybe even add some AI in to let you uh, ask AI, "Hey, tell me what's vulnerable. Um, Tell me what I should focus on." So, kind of helping using AI to help get rid of some of that noise. And then, as we get into the back half of the year, then the North Star would be to add operating system vulnerabilities because that's a lot more vulnerabilities. It's a lot more in depth, and also add um, unknown software. Right, scan the hard drive for uh, you know one-click executables, look for applications that executables that aren't registered, um, look through, the file system. So that would give us a much more in-depth scan of the application vulnerability management, and then also close the loop on operating system vulnerability management because we'll have operating system vulnerabilities and then the ability to patch the operating system vulnerability as well in the back half of the year. So bringing all that together, and then throwing in a little bit of AI over the top and some reporting around SLA dwell time. How long does that vulnerability sit on a given instance? So you can start reporting some trending and proving that you're getting better over time at reducing the time that vulnerabilities sit on an asset on an endpoint, and kind of actually starting to plant some SLAs or SLOs to either your internal or external customers around how long you want those vulnerabilities to sit.
I am going to put you on the spot here a little bit, only because this isn't your product, but I know we are also reinventing Windows patch management. Obviously, between our Windows patch management team and your Vuln team, um, how are we putting that together in terms of that modernization that is really the Ecoverse project that we're going through?
Yeah, so vulnerability management lives in the Yugoverse side of the house, right? So that's one of the reasons why we can't just call patch today. I'd love to, but I can't because we don't have the Ecoverse driven patching components complete yet. But as we're building that Ecoverse patch management, we're building it together with vulnerability management, right? So it's not just going to be. I mean, if you want to, right, as a customer, you can choose to just do patch management, right? But patch management is just, hey, did I install all the patches that missing patches said were missing? Vulnerability management is a larger subset of that, but we're leveraging that patch management engine for Windows patch and Linux and Mac patching. That same engine to deploy. So we're not going to lay on like multiple agents to do the same thing. But I think the part of the reinvention is uh, rather than just relying on patch management to tell me what's missing, we're actually implementing a vulnerability scanner because sometimes there are vulnerabilities that don't have patches yet, but you need to know they're there. So today, if you're in N-Central or N-Site, and you're relying on patch management to tell you what you're vulnerable to, there are gaps, there are holes because it's only understands the corpus of the environment of what patches are missing, not what vulnerabilities exist. So there will be a mismatch, and this is just the nature of you know vulnerability detection to patch release, right? There will be a mismatch in there are vulnerabilities that have no patch available, right? Um, so but we are going together. That new Windows patch engine, third party patch engine, um, is coming together. And actually, probably the first place you're going to see it, that patch engine will not be in an Ecoverse patch view. It will be in a very tactical, remediate this one thing right now through vulnerability management, because a lot of the things that are kind of, you know, being reinvented around policy management, and install sequencing and retries and patch success and patch failure, right? Those are things that are taking time to build, but the actual engine of do the thing for me right now at this very moment, that's much closer to being done. And so one of the things I'm working with the patch team is to bring that forward quicker by sticking it in vulnerability management, where, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to say, all right, just always apply this patch no matter where you find it from a policy driven perspective. Sure, great. And you can do that today still in patch management in Central Insight. But in the moment, you wake up in the morning and there's a new vulnerability all over the news and you want to go see which of your systems have it and can you patch it right now, right? That scenario, we're going to give you the ability to fix that in vulnerability management, uh, you know, in the first or second quarter of next year.
In terms of roadmap, maybe we can end on this. Um, Obviously, we're looking through in terms of vulnerability scanning. We're looking at third-party products or applications. We will look at, obviously Windows, Mac, and Linux devices. Can you talk a little bit about the other things, like what's on the network? So can you talk about where we're going to go and maybe potentially when we can do some of those other things?
Yeah, so we're definitely thinking about how do we expand this outside of UEM classic, right? So UEM being unified endpoint management, right? So moving to a broader set of non-endpoint devices like routers, firewalls, switches, Wi-Fi endpoints, um, scanning for those network devices, services, database endpoints, API endpoints, all those things that are not an endpoint. So we're starting to explore the discovery of that. I think probably through the first half of the year, of how do we just discover that they exist in your environment, and how do we register them into the platform, into the Ecoverse. Um, then once we know it's there, it's not a spectacularly large leap to say, uh, based on we know it's there and we know what firmware version it is, we know who owns it, who manufactured it. That's a simple correlation of go back and find the vulnerabilities, the known vulnerabilities, and report on it. So that reporting of adding to your risk register, um, that comes very quickly, comparatively, behind how do I scan for all of these things? How do I do an internal scan? How do I do an external scan? Um, and how do I then inventory those things up and put them into the data store to show you in Ecoverse? Um, and not to, I guess I don't want to make it sound like it's super easy, because there's a lot of other things that are involved in that, right? You've got to deduplicate. Hey, I've got an agent on this endpoint, but I also scanned it and saw it. Is it the same endpoint? Is it something that we don't have an agent on, so now we need to worry about it? It's an unknown agent, right? Oh, it's a firewall, but I can't tell what it is because obviously it's not talking to me because it's a firewall, right? So how do I get people to tell me? So all of those little nits and gnats of network discovery, we've got to get tackled. So that's another team that's going to be working on that. But obviously they're um, I'm one of their customers, as it were, right? Of, hey, you go build me a discovery mechanism that I can actually use to then go and tell people what's vulnerable. So it is in the North Star. It is absolutely on the plan. Um, but how long it takes for us to really get all those discovery things sorted is really the unknown. So I don't want to give you a date. Um, but it is certainly um, part of the intended outcome. right? Just because we understand that, there are MSPs and there are customers that want to see all that stuff in the same place too.
Of course. Um, Maybe we could switch gears a little bit and talk about the who. Um, I will quote the infamous Dave McKinnon when he says security is a team sport. Obviously, we have in the midst of 2025 the convergence of IT operations and security operations. They are slowly, but they are coming together. There are going to be certain resources who are going to have to troubleshoot and take care of these things. Can you talk about how maybe we're going to bring some ease of use around that, whether you're a security practitioner or whether you're an IT operations, like an actual technician dealing with the day to day?
Yeah. So part of, and this is part of maybe my lived experience from my prior life, and part of yours as well, right? So, you know, the process today is very often that the IT ops person gets an email from somebody in security and says, "Hey, here's your scan report for the month. Go fix these." Right? Um, and that's that's kind of that separation of duties. Understand? I get it. Right? Who watches the watchers? But if that could all be tied together, right? Here's the list of things I have to fix. Oh, great! In the same place, I can say, "Fix this." Right? The IT ops person isn't chasing it down. They aren't kind of trying to keep track of it in some kind of double entry ledger of sorts. Um, but potentially even the security, analyst who has what they think might be a current outbreak or current issue. If both teams are working in our UEM, um, they'll see the same information and they can take those actions. Right? I can't understate the power to a security operations team of having an agent on the endpoint that they can actually go take control of it, go look at what it's doing, and potentially reboot it, ship a patch to it, run a script on it. Right. So when I ran MSSP, um, just having like a feed of alarms was nice, and a feed of threats that I needed to go deal with was nice. But if I couldn't actually go put hands on the device in the moment, my response time, my ability to control or contain some kind of ongoing breach or head off the risk at the pass before it became a breach was hampered. An MSP though is or an IT organization that's using a UEM, they're always resident on that endpoint with that agent, right? So having the ability to see there's a risk and do something about that risk in the same place, whether you're wearing a sock hat or a knock hat, right? Those are kind of the generics. Um, huge, huge for bringing that cycle together. And also, you're down to one sort of source of truth, right? As opposed to competing sources of truth and wondering, well, which one's most up to date? The scan report from a month ago or the scan that just ran on the asset an hour ago, right? And there aren't a lot of competing products out there that are at that level where they're scanning the asset regularly, almost continuously, right? In the grand scheme of things, we scan every 6 hours or so just to see if there's a change in the software inventory. As we start looking at more stuff, we won't be able to scan that often because it'll be impactful to the endpoint. But you know, there are not a lot of solutions out there that are going to update the threat posture of that endpoint every 6 hours or even daily, right? So having that up to date information someplace where, in the same place that it's actionable, even if today it's a little bit clunky to go action it manually, right? In N-Central as opposed to a single click out of the vulnerability management screen, but just having that in one place for both the security team and the IT management team to use the same set of tools, the same set of information, huge. And as we continue to bring that together, um, that vulnerability management workflow together with patch 2.0 from the Ecoverse. I think it gets even better. Uh, and, not to leave our admin folks out in the cold, right? We're also working with them to bring some of that vulnerability management IT ops capability together with the adlumin MDR capabilities. So having them use the same vulnerability management feed and act on it using the same kind of MDR methodologies, but act on it with the agent that we've got deployed.
You are not only a technology leader, but a business leader for a very, very, very large MSP, MSSP. Can we talk a little bit, and I know it's probably not your bag, but if you could touch on a little bit about the opportunity, only because there is opportunity here for MSPs, MSSPs, co-managed IT. What can you tell me what vulnerability management is actually going to be bringing in terms of the opportunity?
Yeah, so I can tell you that nobody likes doing patching, right? Nobody gets excited, wakes up in the morning and says, "I want to patch systems."
I do, but
Okay, well, like
I am a nerd, so
you
I
are a
mean,
nerd.
there's
It's
that.
yeah, that's does what it says on the tin, right? Um, so so one of the things that we discover from a business opportunity is right focus on this process is key to actually making it better, right? Um, so when you talk about um, small organizations, they're not going to have the small businesses. They're not going to have the headcount to even do it, right? So for MSPs that are serving small organizations, it just has to be part of your. It has to be part of your offering. Otherwise, you're leaving yourself and them at risk. Um, and it's very hard to like put a dollar figure on how much that's worth, right? Because you're generally bundling everything together into one big package of we'll just make your life better. But as you move up the size of organization, size of customer organization, into that mid and large enterprise, and you start talking about co-managing, where you're trying to integrate with an existing IT department as an MSP. Um, the well, we're just going to take care of everything kind of starts to break down because you can't. They won't let you, or you just don't have the scope and scale to do it. But what you can do is you can build a focused offering around doing this one cycle, this one thing. Um, those of you, those who know me well, know that I have in the past called it janitorial IT. Uh, right? It's taking out the trash, right? So, but if you think about how you approach that with a larger organization, with a large customer, um, you're offering to go and take out the trash and clean their bathroom, right? If all you're doing for that large enterprise or that mid-market customer is co-managing and doing patch management, right? You can build that cycle and process and you can charge money, right, to do that for them so that they don't have to, right? So when we all talk about focus and outsourcing, one of the big themes in outsourcing has always been outsource the things that are not strategic or critical to your business, and outsource the things that you aren't focused on, right? There's no magical solution to necessarily to vulnerability management. There's kind of a way you have to do it, and there's only one way to do it. The problem is that if you're an enterprise business, there's nothing about doing vulnerability management that is adds strategic value to your business, right? If you make water pumps, does getting really good at IT vulnerability management make you any money? No, it doesn't. Um, but if you outsource that to an MSP or MSSP, who that is a big part of their business, it's what they focus on, right? They will operate at a scale and an efficiency and a focus, and they will have tools around delivering that at a level that is good or better than you could do yourself. Um, so if you're an MSP on the other side of that transaction, you want to be focusing with the right tools that allow you to manage multi-tenant, that allow you to, but still allow you to do the same process regardless of which customer it is, right? So that you can scale, be profitable, and the margin can come from the fact that you do it better because you do it at scale compared to them doing it themselves. So you can go and have a very honest business conversation with a customer and say, it's costing you X to hire these people to sit here and do this. They constantly get distracted because they're multi-rolled. And so ultimately what ends up happening is you think you're paying X to get this outcome, this risk reduction, risk management function done, but you're not getting it. You're still spending the money. And so it's actually costing you more to do it yourself than if you gave me half that budget, right? Let your people focus on things that are actually strategic to your business. I will take out your IT trash for you, and I will focus on doing that and do it in such a way where I can be profitable at less than it costs you to do yourself, all in. If you can start to have that conversation around vulnerability management as a service, it sells itself. So notice what I didn't have in there anywhere. There's no fear. There's no fear mongering. There's no, if you don't do vulnerability management, you're going to get breached. No, you don't even have to have that conversation. What you have is the conversation of, you have to do this. You know the risks if you don't. I'm not going to try and scare you into it. You think you're spending money to get it done, but you're not actually getting it done with any efficacy. I have a proven way of doing it. It works for X, Y, and Z customer. It works all the time. In fact, I've got all the reporting already built in to my systems, SLAs, all that good stuff. It's preformed, it's pre-priced, it's deterministic. You're going to pay for X and get Y outcome. If you build that solution, it sells itself. So there's a huge business opportunity for adopting tool sets that let you do that, and then shopping it around. Whether you're doing it because you have to, because you're kind of an all-in MSP, or you're focusing in that mid to large co-managed space.
Now, I know we're getting close to time, but I wouldn't mind wrapping up with some forward-looking thoughts here. If you had one piece of advice for IT leaders or MSPs trying to build a stronger, more resilient kind of business or security practice, what would you recommend? Like, what are the things that IT pros or managed service providers can do today to be more resilient? Can you maybe touch on that just a little bit?
I'd probably be a little self-serving in this, but if you can just lock the door, right? Close off the avenues of attack that will put you at risk. And those avenues of attack are software vulnerabilities. They're open ports that shouldn't be open. And they're, users that aren't using two-factor or aren't using strong passwords, right? Those are the open doors that the bad guys get in. Just lock the doors. The environment is so rich with opportunity that unless it's a determined targeted attack, if the door's locked, they're going to move on. They're going to go find another person. All right. So lock the doors, patch the vulnerabilities, or close them. Make sure you've got meaningful two-factor turned on, right? And just, run a network scan and see what's open. Make sure you don't have RDP open to the internet, right? Simple stuff. It's blocking and tackling. There's no magic bullet. It's blocking and tackling, basics, and it's boring.
But this is basic cyber hygiene, right?
It is.
Like,
it is.
And an important aspect is obviously doing what you described.
Just take out the trash, man. Just take out the trash.
Jeff, this has been awesome. Vulnerability management, isn't just about scanning. I think that's really what this is about. Yes, we're providing technology, scanning systems, but it's also building confidence, within resilience in your business. Obviously, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day today And obviously, thanks to everyone for listening and obviously making security part of your daily operation. My name is Jason Murphy, head nerd for Enabled. Thank you so much.
Thank you.